There's a guy who has a bungalow upstate in the Catskills, and every Friday he drives up for the weekend, and he always sees on the side of the road this farmer with a sign that says fresh tomatoes. So one time he's driving up, he has a little bit extra time, he pulls over and he asks the farmer how much for a tomato. So the farmer says, it depends. He says, okay, let me look. He goes over to the vine, he sees a nice big red plump tomato. He says, how much is this one? He says, that one, that'll be $5. He says, $5? I don't know. So he looks at the vine, he sees a tiny little scrawny little green one, just a baby. It's not close to ripe. Tiny little green tomato. He says, how much is that one? He says, that one? I don't know, 50 cents. The guy says, perfect. I'll come back at the end of the summer and pick it up. In this week's Parshas Kedoshim, we have 51 mitzvahs, 13 positive commandments and 38 negative, according to the Sefer HaChinuch. And one of those mitzvahs is a mitzvah called Orla, which has to do with the fruit of a fruit-bearing tree being prohibited for the first 3 years, first 3 seasons. We read, V'chisavayu el haaretz, when you enter the land, netaitem kol eitz meichel, and you plant a fruit-bearing tree, v'araltem or loses piryeh shalashanim yelachem arelim leyeochel. The fruit should be held off or blocked off from you. That's what Orla actually means. For 3 years, it shall not be eaten. Vashana haravias, and then in the 4th year, yekol piryeh kedesh elulim lashem, all of the fruit should then become holy. What does that mean? It means it has a sacred status, like Meiser Sheni, like the second tithe, which can only be eaten in the holy city of Yerushalayim. It becomes sort of like a korban, like a sacrifice in a certain way. Uvashana chamishis, then in the 5th year, teichlu es piryeh, you can eat the fruit, meaning with no restrictions, just eat it regular. Lahoisef lachem tvuasei, and the purpose of this mitzvah, following this mitzvah, is in order to increase for you your yield. Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am Hashem your God, who backs up this promise that the purpose and the end effect of adherence to this mitzvah is to increase for you your yield. This is an interesting mitzvah. There's much to be said about the mitzvah of Orla, but one simple question is, let's just think about the chronology here, the progression, or the story that the fruit goes through. We start off first 3 years of the tree, and the tree is prohibited, and the fruits are prohibited. Like non-kosher food. I mean, not like non-kosher food. It is non-kosher. It's prohibited. Which means it is klipa, to use the Kabbalistic term. It is the husk, the shell. That's a term we use for the extraneous dimension within creation that hides the life force that creates everything. Prohibited things are klipa. We don't see the spark of Hashem within them, even though everything has a spark of Hashem within it in order for it to exist. But it's covered, meaning it's opaque. We don't see its divine purpose, and therefore it's inaccessible to us, like all things that are prohibited. Then what happens after 3 years is that it becomes holy. It becomes holy, and that's why it has to be brought to Yerushalayim to be eaten there. Holy, like a korban, like an offering, is holy. And then in the 5th year, and subsequently after that, continuing after that, it becomes regular. Okay, so what happened here? It started off as the lowest of the low. It's prohibited. Klippa, or what we call shalosh klippas atameus, irredeemable klippa. Then it became the highest of the high. It became kedusha, holiness. And then it came back down and became neutral, what we call Kabbalistically klippas noiga, or the translucent or the glowing husk. Why is it called glowing? Because it's not opaque, it's translucent. You can see the glow, so to speak, of the godly spark within it. Something that's neutral, it's not holy, it's not designated for holy purposes for serving Hashem, but you can see how it could be used that way. So anything that's neutral, and most of the physical world is neutral, meaning it can be used for good or, God forbid, for the opposite. That's called klipas noiga, that in between or neutral phase. So it's very funny. Here's the story. Don't. Starts off at the lowest, goes to the highest, and then it becomes middle. Seemingly, the trajectory should be, it starts off at the lowest, then it becomes the middle, like neutral, and then it ends up being holy. And that's the climax. That's the pinnacle of it all. So it's very funny, dum. Comes back halfway down. So we have to understand that. In addition, we have to understand, not only does it follow that trajectory, but the verse told us that the purpose of the whole observance of this mitzvah was, for what purpose? Like we read, Lohaisef lechem tv'aseh, to increase your yield, meaning the yield in the 5th year and all subsequent years. What does that mean? It means that we go through that whole process in order just to come to the middle level where the fruits are neutral, where they're neither holy nor profane. They're just sort of in between. So that the whole purpose of the whole mitzvah was to come to that neutral level, as if that's the goal. It's very hard to understand. The goal should be to reach the highest level, not to go higher and then come back lower. So it sounds almost like the Thermidorian reaction. Thermidorian reaction is a political science term. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? Because in the French Revolution, it took place in the French, they made up new months. The month of Thermidor was the French Revolution. So they said that they took 2 steps forward by getting rid of King Louis, but then they took 1 step back with the French Republic, or maybe with Napoleon. And the point is, there you're talking about a practical thing, that when change happens, it's a radical change, a big change, a revolution. But then things settle back down. That's very hard to look at a mitzvah that way. That at first there's this big burst and everything goes to a very high level, but then it settles back down. That's not how Torah works. That's not how Yiddishkeit works. No, we're mailim b'kodesh. We ascend in matters of holiness. Everything's always going higher. We're always progressing toward the ultimate goal. I mean, not to get onto a side topic, but that's what the whole history of the world, everything that happens is we're working toward Mashiach. Every development is ultimately progress. Underlying everything is that constant ascendance toward the ultimate goal. So again, the fruits start off as the lowest of the low, irredeemable klippa, meaning they're not kosher. Then they become the holy. They become holy. They like a sacrifice. They have to be brought to Jerusalem, and then they drop down to regular, to normal. Okay. And by the way, before we continue this, I just do want to mention, not that this is a class in halacha, but people wonder, is the mitzvah of Orla kept in our day, and is it kept in chutz la'aretz, in the diaspora outside of the land of Israel? And the answer is, although that many agricultural laws do not apply in our time and in chutz la'aretz, but Orla does, and we have to be careful about it. There's a story about the Alter Rebbe when he was a little boy. He was with his brother, Rabbi Yehuda Leib, and Rabbi Yehuda Leib came over to the Alter Rebbe, the Balatanya, the first Rebbe of Chabad, and he asked him, what's the bracha achreina on an apple? He was a little kid, so he didn't know. He was asking. So the Alter Rebbe says, why are you asking? He says, because that lady, a non-Jewish lady, gave me an apple. He said, where did she get it from? And from that apple orchard right there. He said, oh no, that's Orla. So he actually, as a young Rebbe, gave his brother a tikkun. He told him, from now on, never eat anything, never put anything in your mouth until you have ascertained that it is kosher, that you look into the kosher status of anything you eat before you eat it every single time. But the point is that Orla is a mitzvah that we do keep even now and even outside of Eretz Yisrael. There's a machlekes between Sfardim and Ashkenazim, the Mechaber and the Ramah, regarding the 4th year. And then it has to do with whether it's regular fruits or specifically grapes. Grapes is another category, the 4th year, Neterovoi. but even according to the Ramah, was more lenient about the fourth year, that we do keep the fourth year prohibition. In which case, we actually, because we, without getting into technicalities, we can't really keep the laws as if it were Ma'aser Sheni, so we're paid that we redeem it instead. But the first 3 years, the prohibitory years, where the fruits are non-kosher, that's both the Mechaber and the Ramah, Sfardim and Ashkenazim, both keep this for all fruits. So again, our question: what's with that weird trajectory of going up and sliding back down? So I'm going to tell you a story. The Baal Shem Tov, before he was revealed, he used to go from town to town, and he would meet simple Jews, regular Jews, and he would ask them, "Was machst du? How are you doing?" And the whole purpose of asking them, "How are you doing?" is because these simple Jews, many of them were illiterate, they couldn't learn, but they had simple faith. And when someone would ask them, "How are you doing?" they would say, Baruch Hashem, or the various different, Yiddish colloquialisms, Danktum B'Shefer. However they would say, they would express their simple, sincere gratitude to Hashem. And the Baal Shem Tov had a reason why he was doing this, that he understood that this was a very powerful tool in connecting the Jewish people to Hashem, and that this is something on high, that in heaven was required and desired and caused tremendous nachas on high for Hashem. So he would go around getting people to say these praises of thank God and the like in whatever day-to-day language they were speaking. So the Baal Shem Tov came to a town, and he was asking them, "How are you doing?" And they would give, they would thank God, everything's good, Baruch Hashem, Dank zum Eibishten. And then he found out there was a shul where there was this Parshas. What's a Parshas? A Parshas is an ascetic, sort of a recluse. There was this guy who, he lived in shul, slept on a bench. He only ate a little crust of bread once a day at night after a whole day of Torah study. Very, very spiritual guy, or at least in his own estimation. So the Baal Shem Tov comes in, he finds this ascetic, this Parshas, and he says to him, "Was machst du, Rabbi Yid, was machst du?" And the guy doesn't answer. Why? Because he's learning Torah, and that's more important than answering and having small talk. So he doesn't answer. So the Baal Shem Tov says again, "Rabbi Yid, was machst du? How are you doing?" He won't answer. The Baal Shem Tov keeps asking, "Was machst du?" So at this point, he can tell the guy, the guy's like sort of like making motions, like, I could answer you, but I'm not going to. Like, giving him the side eye. And finally, the Baal Shem Tov says, "Rabbi Yid, why do you deprive Hashem of his parnasa, of his livelihood?" Well, that's it. Now the guy, he provoked him. He got up and he says, "How can you speak such heresy? What are you talking about, giving Hashem his livelihood?" The Baal Shem Tov said, it's very simple. It says in Tehillim, the holy psalms of King David, "Va'ata kodesh yeshiv tilas Yisrael." You, Hashem, are sustained, are settled through the prayers or the praises that the Jewish people give you. That's what gives Hashem his parnasa, his livelihood, so to speak, is he consumes those prayers and those praises, that sincere, heartfelt gratitude. When a Jew says, thank Hashem, thank God, Dank zum Eibishten, and you're refusing to do it, so you're refusing Hashem's parnasa. This shook the guy up so much, totally threw him for a loop, and he rethought his whole worldview. There are some versions of this story that the Parshas was Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, who went on to be one of the great Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov. But at any rate, the point of the story remains the same. What did Hashem want? He wanted that a Jew should look at his day-to-day life, his health, his family, the fact that he can put bread on the table, regular day-to-day mundane things, and see that that's from Hashem. In other words, that our connection to Hashem shouldn't just be in our religious life, but even more importantly, that we see the connection to Hashem in our day-to-day, regular, mundane affairs. Eating, drinking, sleeping, exercising. All the things that we do just because we're human beings and we have bodies and we live in the world. Those mundane things, to connect that to Hashem. And that is Hashem's livelihood, so to speak. When we praise Hashem and we see Hashem in the mundane. And this is one of the most basic teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. The idea of sanctifying the mundane, of uplifting the choil, the vochadik, the regular day-to-day, and making it holy by connecting it to our service of Hashem and our love of Hashem and our awe of Him. In fact, the whole purpose for which your holy soul left the holy heavens and came down to this physical world was for that purpose, was to sanctify the mundane. The holy is already holy, but a Jew came down to this world to make the mundane holy, to make this world holy, and not only holy, and not only heavenly, but ultimately when Mashiach comes, the ultimate goal is to make this world holier than heaven. So I'll tell you another story. The great Chassid and Mashpia Reb Hillel Parashas used to tell a story. Sometimes at a Fabrengen, he would tell a story. What was the story? It was a story about the Maharam Mirottenberg. Who was the Maharam? The Maharam was born in the city of Worms, or what we call Vermeise, in 1215 CE. He lived in France. In fact, he was present in 1244 at the Cathedral of Notre Dame, the one that just burnt down last year, when they did a mass book burning of the Talmud. 24 wagon loads of the Talmud were burned in front of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. And Maharam was present for that. In fact, he wrote later a poem, a lament that we read on. It's included in the Tisha B'Av readings. Later, he moved back to Germany. Persecution was also terrible over there. And finally, in 1286, he decided that he and his family are going to move to Eretz Yisrael, to the Holy Land. And they set out from Germany across Europe. They made it as far as Italy, to northern Italy, to Lombardy. And there, an apostate Jew who had a bone to pick with Jewish leadership and wanted to prove his loyalty to the Catholic Church, he went to local authorities and he said that the Maharam is a troublemaker, he's a criminal, and to arrest him, and they did so, and they sent him back, they extradited him back to Germany, and there the king, King Rudolph, put the Maharam in a tower, in a great fortress, in a tower, as a prisoner, and said that he would not be released until a ransom of 20,000 marks was paid. The Maharam told the Jewish community, do not give them one coin, because he understood that if it became a good business, if it became lucrative to start ransoming Jewish leadership, then all rabbis would be at risk of such a fate. So the Maharam had great self-sacrifice, and he told the Jewish community, do not pay the ransom. And for 7 years, he was a prisoner in that tower. For 7 years. And he wrote Sfarim while he was in prison. And he continued to teach, but he was a prisoner. And he died there in captivity after 7 years. After he died, they begged that they should at least release the body so he could have a Jewish burial. And even that, they refused. After 14 years, a Jew, a wealthy Jew by the name of Reb Alexander Ziskind Wimpfen, was able to bribe the authorities and to have the holy body of the Maharam released for Jewish burial after 14 years. So finally, the Maharam was buried with his people, and sometime later, during the Seres Yemei HaTshuva, during the 10 days of penitence between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, this Reb Alexander, the wealthy man who had paid for the release of the body, had a dream. And in his dream, the Maharam appeared to him and thanked him for getting his body out and burying it with Jewish burial. And the Maharam said to him, I'm speaking to you from heaven, and I want to reward you for what you did for me. And I have two rewards that I can give you. One reward is that I can make sure the money that you spent redeeming my body will be replaced, and even more so that you and all of your descendants for all time will always be extremely wealthy. That's one reward I can give you. Behind door number two, the other option is I can bring you with me to my compartment in paradise. Imi b'michitzasi. You can come to my level of Gan Eden. But if you want that one, it has to be tomorrow. You have to leave the earthly existence tomorrow, and you'll come up to Gan Eden, and you're going to be with me on my level. So this Rebbe Alexander, he woke up from the dream. He understood it was a real vision, and he went to his wife and his children, and he wrote a will, and he said goodbye to them, and he explained to them he was being rewarded. He was going to Gan Eden and to the highest levels with the Maharam himself. And that's exactly what transpired. And he left this world on that very day. So Reb Hillel used to tell this story. And after he would tell the story, he would ask the Chassidim who were assembled, no, and what would you do? If you were given the choice that Reb Alexander was given, which would you take? Would you take the money or the Gan Eden? And generally people would give the answer that they thought is the right answer to give, the more spiritual answer, the more refined, the more lofty. Of course, we would take the Gan Eden, we would take the paradise. Well, what's money? It's material. We would take the spiritual. And this is what people would always answer. And then Reb Hillel would say, fools, fools. You're going to take a higher level in paradise. What good does that do anybody but you? Take the money, and then you can redeem more captives and do more good and help more people in this world. As we said, this is one of the basic concepts the Baal Shem Tov taught. That we were sent to this world to make this world a holy place. To take regular day-to-day things, the mundane, the choil, and make it Kedoshim. So now we understand the trajectory of the status of the fruits when it comes to the laws of Orla. It does go from the lowest to the highest. It is constantly ascending closer to the ultimate goal. You know why? Because we have to rethink our whole way of understanding it. We were thinking it starts off as the lowest, which is prohibited, non-kosher. Then it goes to the highest, becomes holy. And then it drops down into the middle and becomes ordinary. No, you don't understand. Ordinary is the highest. The regular fruits, which are klipas noiga, which are neutral, which are neither prohibited nor holy, but just regular, waiting there with their potential to be redeemed. That's where it's at. That's why the soul was sent to the world, in order to engage with all the things of this world that are neutral, that are not holy, but have the potential to be used for the service of Hashem. That's the ultimate goal, and that's what accomplishes the ultimate goal of bringing Mashiach, of making this world completely refined and holy. And that's why it says that the whole purpose of the mitzvah is l'hoisef lachem t'v'osei, to increase the produce of the 5th year and the 6th year and all the subsequent years, because the purpose of the mitzvah is not the first 3 years or the 4th year. No, the whole goal of Yiddishkeit, of Judaism, is what happens with the ordinary, with the regular stuff, the day-to-day stuff, and using that as a vessel to serve Hashem.